I knew it. It's the same man. I called Father Morrison 2 days ago. I told you I was going to, and I keep my promises. Always. Asked how old his parishioner was. Ramirez, the police officer, the one from the Chen case. He said 63. I asked if he knew where Ramirez was before coming to Detroit, and he said, Oregon. I hung up immediately. Didn't need anything else from him. So I went back to the read file. The 1983 Portland case, and right there at the bottom of the follow-up notes, Raymond Ramirez died 1991, heart attack, age 43. 43 in 1991. That puts his birth around 1948, which means in 1983 he was 35. 35, not a 22-year-old county deputy. But Morrison's Ramirez, born around 1961, 63 now, he would have been 22 in 1983. You see where this is going, right? The birth years are 13 years apart. Two different men, clearly, except the name is the same. The Oregon connection is the same, and the 1983 deputy was young, which fits one of them and not the other. And one of them has a death record, and one of them doesn't, unless the death in 1991 was, I don't know, something else, a misfire, a misunderstanding. I don't know how you could misunderstand death, except when you're hiding from it. But, okay, the case, then Ramirez. I need to march forward. I'll come back to Ramirez later. 12th of January 2025. Custodia Ultima Vocis, Isolation Chamber 3. Father Tommaso Lanza analyzing case TM 1667039. The subject is Thomas Krzysztof Nowotny, 51, cathedral organist at St. Vitus in Prague, 22 years in the post, trained from boyhood. His letters describe the organ as a mechanism for the faithful, and himself as its servant, not its author. He was very specific about this. The distinction mattered to him for reasons he never committed to paper. He died March 12, 1667, Tuesday, during Vespers. St. Vitus is... I've been trying to think how to describe this to someone who hasn't stood inside it. It's enormous, but that's not quite the right word. A lot of buildings are enormous. St. Vitus is enormous in a particular acoustic way. The stone vaulting starts around 30 meters and keeps going. Walls 3 meters thick. Sound in there doesn't decay the way it does in a normal room. It accumulates, bounces off angled stone from multiple directions, and what you get is a whisper in one corner of the nave appearing faintly in a completely different part of the building 30 seconds later. Organists at St. Vitus spent years learning how their instruments sounded in that particular space, season by season, full attendance against empty pews. Thomas Nowotny had 22 years of it. The organ itself was a Companions tradition instrument, rebuilt 6 years before this, 1661. 17 stops, 2 manuals, and the bellows, the mechanism that pushed air through the pipes, required a separate operator entirely. One person whose only job during any service was to work the handles and maintain steady pressure, regardless of what was happening anywhere else in the cathedral. On March 12th, that person was a 16-year-old apprentice named Jakub Rzija. He'd been doing this for 8 months. 41 people at Vespers, midweek, poor weather, regulars. The accounts described the first hour and 40 minutes as unremarkable. Standard liturgical music. Nowotny played well, as he always did. No one was paying him particular attention. It was background to prayer, which is exactly what he wanted to be. At the 52nd minute of the second hour, the music stopped, in the middle of a bar, in the middle of a chord, cut off, like a word half said. The main witness is a merchant named Václav Beneš, whose account the Custodia obtained in 1712 when the Benedictines finally handed over their unexplained incident records. He described the silence that followed as heavy, actual weight pressing down on people. His first assumption, like many others, was Bellows' failure. He turned to check Jakub. Jakub was still pumping, same steady rhythm, air still moving. Novotny stopped playing but hadn't stood up. He was still sitting at the bench, hands on the keys, back straight, eyes forward. Václav says it took several seconds to understand that the organist wasn't choosing to be still, that the stillness was wrong in a way that took time to identify, the way sometimes you look at something that's broken and your brain keeps insisting it isn't. The physician's report places death at the moment the music stopped. Cardiac arrest. 51 years old, no recorded illness, no prior symptoms. His heart stopped in the middle of a chord. Now I need to explain exactly what happened next, because the case file describes it in the language of medical reports and ecclesiastical incident documentation, which is to say it smooths everything flat and calls the interesting parts unusual vocalizations and anomalous acoustic phenomena. I've been looking at this file for 4 hours. I want to be more precise than that. Jakub was 12 meters from the organ bench. He could see the hands on the keys, the body upright. He could not, however, see the face. He had been trained, the way all Bellows apprentices were trained, that his job was the air and the air only. That whatever happened during a service, whatever the priest did, whatever the congregation did, or whatever the organist did, none of it was Jakub's concern. His concern was steady pressure. Constant, no interruption. So when the music stopped and nothing told him to stop, he kept pumping. I want you to understand the physical layout of the organ. The organ is built into the rear of the cathedral, elevated. The pipes rise above and behind the manuals, the keyboards, and in front of those, at bench level, the organist sits. The Bellows system, in a companion tradition instrument, pushes air horizontally through the wind chest and then vertically up into the pipes. But it also necessarily moves air through the body of the instrument itself, through the space around the manuals, to the gap between the front of the keyboard housing and the open air of the loft. Which means Jakub, pumping, was pushing air through a machine, and that machine's mouth was pointing directly at where Novotny was sitting. The human voice is also a mechanism. Air moves through the lungs, up through the trachea, and past the larynx. The larynx vibrates, and then the tongue and lips and teeth shape that vibration into something recognizable. That is all speech is. Moving air through a series of biological structures, each one imposing a different constraint on the sound until what comes out is language. Thomas Novotny's lungs were stopped. His larynx was stopped. His chest was not moving. But Jakub was still pumping, and the air was still moving through the instrument, and some portion of the air was flowing across the dead man's open mouth, and the dead man's throat still had the shape of a human throat. Václav Beneš doesn't describe the beginning of it clearly. He says the sound started as if it always had been there, and he was only now noticing it. Like a sound you realize you've been hearing from some time without registering it. The low register first. He thought it was the organ's lowest pipes, the ones that vibrate the floor, the ones you feel more than you hear. He describes a sensation in his back teeth, a pressure behind his eyes that he initially took for the onset of a headache. Then he looked at Novotny. The dead man's jaw had moved. It was already open slightly, the way a body's mouth falls open after death. It had moved, repositioned. Václav says he watched it happen across a few seconds, watched the jaw lower further, watched the lips pull back, watched the throat, and here his account becomes difficult to follow because he was trying to describe something in the vocabulary of a 17th century merchant that doesn't have words for it. He says the throat moved. The skin on the neck shifted in section, he wrote, like a mechanism finding its correct position, like a lock. Václav looked away. He looked at the other people in the pews. Most of them were still in prayer, heads bowed, oblivious. When he looked back, the sound had changed. It had found its shape. The organist's body was dead. The chest cavity was no longer moving under its own force. But Jakob was still pumping. 16 years old, doing his job 12 meters away, and the air from the bellows was passing to the instrument and out to the open mouth of a dead man and through a throat that had, by some mechanism that the physician reports does not address and that I do not have an explanation for, reposition itself to produce sound. Not the organ's sound. Something that used the organ's pressure and the dead man's anatomy as a combined instrument that neither of them, separately, was designed to be. If it didn't happen in a church, you could think it was the work of the devil. Václav Beneš writes that the sound was wet. That was the word he used repeatedly in multiple places in his account, as if he kept returning to it because it was the most accurate thing he had, and it still wasn't accurate enough. Wet. He could hear liquid in it, he said. Like a room where everything is damp, where every surface has a thin layer of water, and sound moves through that room differently than it moves through dry air. He also writes that it was slow, very slow, each component of each word taking what seemed like 8-10 seconds at time, long enough that he could feel the sound landing on him and moving through him, through his chest, his abdomen, before the next component arrived. And it was cold. He mentioned this twice. The sound was cold. He'd never heard a sound he would have described as cold before. He didn't know how to explain it further than that. The witnesses who heard it, 4, maybe 5 of the 41 present, all described physical effects in the aftermath. Václav himself, a persistent ringing in the ears that lasted 11 days. A woman named Marketa Orachkova, a baker's wife, she told the confessor the following week that for 3 days after Vespers, she kept waking at the same hour of the night, every night, with the absolute certainty that she was being watched through the wall, through it, from inside the wall itself. The witnesses who heard nothing were completely unaffected. They knew the organist had died because they were told afterward. They noticed a pause in the music and assumed a page turn. A page turn of 3 minutes and 14 seconds. 3 minutes and 14 seconds because a 16-year-old boy thought he was doing his job and nobody told him to stop. Jakub Shia. I found him in a church record from 1713, 46 years later. Died in Brno at 62 of fever. Spent his whole career as a church musician, not an organist, not ever. Always the one maintaining instruments for other people. He married, 4 children. Nothing in any archive I can access suggests he ever described what happened on March 12, 1667. No testimony, no letter, no confessor's notes, nothing. He did what he did, went home, lived 46 more years in silence. I keep thinking about what it was like to be 12 meters away, to hear something with your body and not know what you were hearing, to keep walking anyway because stopping would be wrong and nobody had told you to stop. In 2017, the Custodio sent a material analyst to St. Vitus under cover of historical acoustic research. He scanned 4 original organ pipes from the 1661 rebuild. Metal, well preserved, significant vibromatic memory still embedded in the alloy. He sent back the data and it sat in the archive for 3 years before anyone touched it. The analysis was completed in November 2020, then shelved. No translation notes attached. No follow-up file open. 5 years of nothing. I'm added to the list of gaps I can't explain yet, and the list is getting long. The reconstruction is 92 seconds, about 30% of the full manifestation the analyst estimates. The rest was too degraded. So this is the part where I say I'm going to play it and then analyze it, and yet I get the meaning of it just by listening to it, but I convince myself this is not the right direction, so I take the lexicon, I try to cross-reference it, I find missing pages, and I can't do it. I can't do it right now. Something has changed since December, since the Golgotha file, and I'm stuck. I'm stuck. I cannot hear the tongue again. But without hearing it, I cannot analyze it, of course, so I can't do my job. But I know I need to keep doing this. I know Visconti needs me, and the custodian needs me, and you need me too, Ellen. I know, but I need a break. I seriously need a break. I'm about to break.